The sun was setting over Crescent Bay when Daniel Cooper spotted the motionless figure washed up on the shoreline. Her long, dark hair splayed across the wet sand like seaweed. A jolt of adrenaline shot through his body as he dropped the plastic shovel he'd been holding for his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. "Stay with Mrs. Patel," Daniel shouted to his daughter, pointing at their elderly neighbor who was sitting nearby under a beach umbrella. He sprinted across the sand, his heart hammering against his ribs. 3 years as a volunteer firefighter before budget cuts had eliminated his position had trained him for this moment, though he hadn't needed to use his CPR skills in over a year. As he approached, he could see the woman wasn't moving. Her expensive-looking sundress clung to her body, soaked through with salt water. No one else was nearby on this secluded stretch of beach. The tourists preferred the main beach with its amenities and lifeguards. But Daniel and Lily came to this quiet cove almost daily, a small luxury that cost them nothing. He dropped to his knees beside her, placing 2 fingers on her neck. No pulse. Her skin was still warm, but her lips had a bluish tint. Without hesitation, he tilted her head back, cleared her airway, and began compressions. The woman was slender but athletic, perhaps in her early 30s. Her face, though pale and lifeless, was striking. "Come on," Daniel muttered, pressing rhythmically on her chest. "Breathe." After 30 compressions, he delivered 2 rescue breaths, then resumed compressions. In the distance, he could hear Mrs. Patel on her cell phone, presumably calling 911. Lily's small voice carried across the beach, asking questions Daniel couldn't make out. The woman beneath his hands remained still. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Daniel's arms began to burn, but he didn't stop. He'd been in construction since losing his firefighter job, and his muscles were strong from daily labor. Still, CPR was exhausting, especially when performed correctly. "Don't you dare die," he whispered fiercely. "Your life is just beginning." As if responding to his command, the woman suddenly convulsed, water spurting from her mouth. Daniel quickly turned her onto her side as she coughed violently, expelling seawater onto the sand. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes the color of the ocean at dawn. "You're okay," Daniel said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're safe now. Help is coming." The woman looked up at him, confusion evident in her expression. She tried to speak but could only cough more water. Her hand reached out, fingers grasping weakly at his arm. "Dad," Lily's voice rang out as she ran toward them, ignoring Mrs. Patel's calls to stay back. "Lily, stay there," Daniel commanded, using his stern father voice. His daughter stopped in her tracks, 10 feet away, her small face scrunched with worry. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the evening air. Within minutes, paramedics were rushing down the beach, equipment in hand. As they took over, Daniel stepped back, suddenly aware of his racing heart and trembling hands. He'd been running on pure instinct. "Sir, you performed CPR," one of the paramedics asked as they loaded the woman onto a stretcher. Daniel nodded. "Yes, for about 3 minutes before she responded." "You saved her life," the paramedic said simply. Another minute without oxygen to her brain and... He didn't need to finish the sentence. As they carried the woman away, her gaze found Daniel's. Something passed between them, an electric current of connection that transcended the chaos of the moment. Then she was gone, whisked into the ambulance. Lily ran to him then, wrapping her small arms around his waist. "Daddy, is the pretty lady going to be okay?" Daniel lifted his daughter, holding her close. "I think so, sweetheart. I really think so." That night, after tucking Lily into bed in their modest 2-bedroom apartment, Daniel sat on his threadbare couch, replaying the events at the beach. He wondered about the woman who she was, how she'd ended up unconscious in the water, whether she truly was okay. The local news had nothing about a near drowning, which he took as a good sign. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello." He answered cautiously. "Is this Daniel Cooper?" a female voice asked. It was husky, as if the speaker's throat was raw. "Yes, it is. This is Tessa Davis. You saved my life today. Daniel sat up straighter. How did you get my number? The paramedic, I insisted. There was a pause. I hope that's okay. Of course, Daniel said. I'm just glad you're all right, Miss Davis. Tessa, please. Her voice softened. And I'm not entirely all right. They're keeping me overnight for observation, but the doctors say I'll make a full recovery thanks to you. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, uncomfortable with the gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't. You did. Another pause. I'd like to thank you properly. Could I take you to dinner once I'm discharged? Daniel hesitated. He barely had time for a social life between working construction jobs and raising Lily on his own. Childcare wasn't cheap, and after paying rent and utilities, there wasn't much left over. Besides, he knew nothing about this woman except that she'd nearly drowned. That's really not necessary, he began. Please, Tessa interrupted. I insist. Your daughter is welcome too, of course. The mention of Lily gave him pause. How did she know about his daughter? Then he remembered Lily had run toward them on the beach. Tessa must have seen her. Let me think about it, he said finally. Of course. I'll call you tomorrow if that's okay. After hanging up, Daniel stared at the phone in his hand. There had been something in Tessa's voice, a warmth, a sincerity that tugged at him. It had been so long since he'd connected with anyone outside of his small circle of friends and neighbors. Since Lily's mother had walked out 4 years ago, claiming she wasn't cut out for parenthood, Daniel had focused entirely on being the best father he could be. The following evening, after picking Lily up from her summer day program, Daniel found himself agreeing to meet Tessa for dinner that weekend. She had suggested a casual beachside restaurant, not too fancy, but nice enough for a proper thank you. Is it a date, Daddy? Lily asked as they walked home, her small hand in his. Daniel chuckled. No, sweetheart. The lady I helped at the beach just wants to say thank you. Lily skipped alongside him. She was pretty, like a mermaid. A mermaid who needed help breathing underwater. That doesn't sound like a very good mermaid, Daniel teased. Lily giggled. Maybe she's learning to be a mermaid. Daniel smiled at his daughter's imagination. Maybe so. Saturday evening arrived with perfect California weather, warm with a gentle breeze. Daniel dressed in his best pair of jeans and a button-down shirt that wasn't too wrinkled. Lily wore her favorite sundress, insisting on bringing a small gift she'd made. A seashell necklace strung on a piece of blue yarn. The restaurant, Salt and Sea, was nicer than Daniel had expected. It had a wide deck overlooking the ocean and string lights twinkling overhead. He suddenly felt underdressed and out of place among the well-heeled patrons. Dad, look, Lily pointed excitedly. It's the mermaid lady. Tessa was waiting at a corner table, the sunset casting a golden glow on her face. She looked completely different from the pale, lifeless woman he'd rescued. Her dark hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and she wore a simple blue dress that complemented her eyes. When she saw them, she stood and waved. Daniel, Lily, I'm so glad you could come, she said warmly as they approached. Daniel was struck by how genuinely pleased she seemed. Thank you for inviting us, he replied, suddenly aware of his calloused hands and the small scar above his right eyebrow. I made this for you, Lily announced, thrusting the seashell necklace toward Tessa. Tessa's expression melted into one of surprise and delight. It's beautiful, she said, immediately putting it on. I'll treasure it always. They settled into their seats, and Daniel noticed the table was already set with coloring materials for Lily. The thoughtful gesture touched him. The hostess has children too, Tessa explained, catching his look. I thought Lily might enjoy drawing while we talk. Lily immediately grabbed a crayon and began coloring with enthusiasm. Daniel relaxed slightly, grateful for Tessa's consideration. So, Daniel began, are you feeling better? Tessa nodded. Much better. The doctors say I was lucky if you hadn't found me when you did. She trailed off, then reached across the table to touch his hand briefly. Thank you seems inadequate. I'm just glad I was there, Daniel said honestly, but I've been wondering, what happened? How did you end up in the water? A shadow crossed Tessa's face. I was swimming. I do that every evening when I can. It clears my head, but I got caught in a riptide. I'm usually a strong swimmer, but I'd been pushing myself too hard that day, barely eating. She shook her head. A stupid mistake. I panicked and exhausted myself trying to fight the current instead of swimming parallel to the shore. Daniel nodded, understanding. The currents around Crescent Bay can be treacherous. Lesson learned, Tessa said with a small smile. Now, enough about my foolishness. Tell me about you two. Over dinner, fish tacos for Daniel and Lily. Grilled salmon for Tessa. Daniel found himself opening up more than he had in years. He told her about his work in construction, how he'd been a volunteer firefighter until budget cuts 3 years ago, and how he was taking night classes in building management, hoping to move up to a supervisory position. And Lily's mother? Tessa asked gently. Left when Lily was 2, Daniel said, glancing at his daughter who was happily absorbed in her coloring. Decided parenthood wasn't for her. Tessa's eyes softened with empathy. That must have been difficult for both of you. It was, Daniel admitted, but we've managed, haven't we, Lilybug? Lily looked up and grinned, revealing a missing front tooth. Daddy does the best voices when he reads stories. Tessa laughed. I bet he does. As the evening progressed, Daniel found himself increasingly drawn to Tessa. She was attentive, asking thoughtful questions about Lily's interests and his work. There was no pretension about her, despite the expensive watch on her wrist and the designer sunglasses tucked into her purse. When the check arrived, Daniel reached for it, but Tessa was faster. Please, she said firmly. This is my thank you to you. Daniel hesitated, his pride struggling with the gesture. At least let me leave the tip. Tessa regarded him with those ocean blue eyes. Compromise, I'll get dinner, you get dessert somewhere else another time. The implication that they would see each other again hung in the air between them. Daniel found himself nodding. Deal. As they walked to the parking lot, Lily skipping ahead, Tessa asked, What kind of car are you looking for? Daniel pointed to his aging Honda Civic. That's us. Nothing fancy, but it gets us where we need to go. Tessa nodded, but Daniel caught a flicker of something in her expression, not judgment, but perhaps surprise. She gestured toward a sleek Tesla parked nearby. That's me. The contrast between their vehicles was stark. Daniel felt a twinge of embarrassment, quickly followed by defensiveness. He was doing the best he could as a single father. As if reading his thoughts, Tessa said quietly, You know, my father was a plumber. We never had much growing up, but he made sure I had everything I needed. She smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. I admire what you're doing for Lily. The simple statement eased some of the tension in Daniel's shoulders. Thank you. Can I call you sometime? Tessa asked as they reached his car. Maybe we could take Lily to the aquarium next weekend? My treat. Daniel should have said no. This woman clearly lived in a different world than he did. But there was something about Tessa Davis that drew him in her sincerity, her kindness toward Lily, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. I'd like that, he found himself saying. That night, after putting Lily to bed, Daniel searched Tessa's name online, curious about the woman who drove a Tesla and wore a watch that probably cost more than his monthly rent. What he found left him stunned. Tessa Davis was the founder and CEO of Ocean Tech, a company that developed sustainable marine conservation technologies. Her innovations in ocean cleanup systems had earned her profiles in Forbes and Time magazine. And according to the most recent articles, her company had just been valued at over $500 million. Daniel closed his laptop, feeling a strange mix of awe and trepidation. He had performed CPR on a millionaire tech entrepreneur, and now she wanted to take his daughter to the aquarium. The following week passed in a blur of work and parenting duties, punctuated by text messages from Tessa. She asked about his day, sent funny memes that made him laugh despite himself, and even offered suggestions for Lily's science project about marine life. By the time Saturday arrived, Daniel found himself genuinely looking forward to seeing her again. The aquarium date was a revelation. Tessa knew many of the staff. Personally, she'd apparently funded several of their research initiatives, but she never flaunted her connections. Instead, she focused on making the day magical for Lily, arranging a behind-the-scenes tour of the Sea Turtle Rehabilitation Center and a special feeding session with the otters. "How do you know so much about sea creatures?" Lily asked as Tessa explained why some fish swim in schools. "I love the ocean," Tessa replied simply. "It's my job to help protect it." As they watched the jellyfish glide through their illuminated tanks, Tessa stood close enough to Daniel that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and oceanic. When their hands brushed accidentally, neither pulled away. "Thank you for today," he said quietly as Lily pressed her nose against the glass, entranced by the pulsing creatures. "She's having the time of her life." Tessa's smile was soft in the blue light. "So am I." Over the following weeks, Tessa became a regular presence in their lives. She joined them for pizza nights and movie marathons at Daniel's apartment, never commenting on the worn furniture or the dripping kitchen faucet he hadn't had time to fix. She brought thoughtful gifts books for Lily, a gourmet coffee blend for Daniel, but never anything so expensive that it made him uncomfortable. For his part, Daniel found ways to contribute that didn't involve money. He fixed the loose railing on Tessa's beachfront deck, taught her how to make his grandmother's lasagna, and once, when her car had a flat, changed the tire before the roadside assistance she'd called could arrive. "My hero again," she teased, but her eyes had held genuine appreciation. They developed a rhythm, a comfortable dance of giving and receiving that allowed Daniel to maintain his pride while accepting the occasional treat from Tessa. He was falling for her brilliant mind, her compassion, her unwavering support of his goals and dreams. But he couldn't shake the nagging fear that their worlds were too different, that eventually the novelty of dating a construction worker would wear off. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday evening in October, 2 months after their first meeting. Daniel had picked Lily up from school, only to find her feverish and complaining of an earache. The pediatrician's office was closed, and the urgent care center had a 3-hour wait. Desperate and worried, he'd called Tessa. "My friend Marcus is a pediatrician," she said immediately. "Let me call him." 20 minutes later, they were in Dr. Marcus's private office, where he diagnosed Lily with a severe ear infection and prescribed antibiotics. When Daniel reached for his wallet to pay for the consultation, Dr. Marcus waved him off. "Tessa's taking care of it," the doctor said with a smile. In the car afterward, with Lily dozing in the back seat, Daniel's frustration boiled over. "I can't let you pay for everything, Tessa. I'm not a charity case." Tessa looked at him, surprise evident in her expression. "Is that what you think? That I see you as a charity case? What am I supposed to think? You're worth millions. I'm struggling to make ends meet most months. You can solve problems with a phone call that would take me days and dollars I don't have." Tessa was quiet for a long moment. Rain pattered against the windshield of her car as they sat in the pharmacy parking lot, waiting for Lily's prescription. "When I was drowning," she finally said, "all my money meant nothing. My company, my connections, none of it mattered. But you—" Her voice caught. "You gave me back my life, Daniel. Not because I could pay you or do something for you in return. You did it because that's who you are." She reached for his hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't care about your bank account. I care about your heart. And if you'll let me use my resources to help when Lily is sick, it's not because I think you're a charity case. It's because I love you both, and that's what people who love each other do. They help however they can." Daniel stared at her, the words "I love you" echoing in his mind. "You love me." A smile tugged at Tessa's lips. "Is that really what you took from everything I just said?" "It's the most important part," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, Daniel Cooper, I love you. Your integrity, your dedication to Lily, the way you never take the easy path if it's not the right one." She squeezed his hand. And I understand your pride. I respect it. But please don't push me away because you think I'm looking down on you. I'm not. Daniel was silent for a long moment, processing her words. Finally, he said, I'm sorry. It's been just Lily and me for so long. I'm not used to having someone else to lean on. Well, get used to it, Tessa said, her smile returning, because I'm not going anywhere. Good, Daniel replied, leaning across the center console to kiss her softly. Because I love you too. After that night, something shifted in their relationship. Daniel became more comfortable accepting Tessa's help, especially when it benefited Lily. In turn, Tessa made an effort to include Daniel in decisions that involved spending money on activities or gifts, respecting his need to contribute. As Thanksgiving approached, Tessa invited Daniel and Lily to join her at her beach house for the holiday. It would be the first time they'd spent an entire weekend together, a significant step. It's not as grand as you might expect, Tessa warned as they pulled up to the modest but beautiful home overlooking Crescent Bay. I bought it after my first major investment round. I could afford something bigger now, but this place feels like home. The house was perfect 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen that opened onto a deck facing the ocean, and large windows that filled the space with light. Lily immediately ran to the window seat in the living room, claiming it as her reading nook. I love it, Daniel said honestly. It suits you. Thanksgiving dinner was an intimate affair, just the 3 of them plus Tessa's longtime assistant, Michael, and his husband, James. They cooked together, laughed, and shared stories. When it came time to say what they were thankful for, Lily announced, I'm thankful that Daddy saved Tessa so she could become our friend. The adults exchanged emotional glances across the table. Later, after Lily had gone to bed in the guest room decorated with sea turtle wallpaper that Tessa had installed just for her, Daniel and Tessa stood on the deck, watching the moonlight on the waves. That day on the beach, Tessa said quietly, when I opened my eyes and saw you. There was something in your face, determination, strength, but also kindness. I felt safe, even though I didn't know you. Daniel wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. I remember thinking how beautiful you were, even though you were half dead, he admitted, earning a soft laugh from Tessa. Such a romantic. They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the rhythm of the waves. Finally, Tessa turned in his arms to face him. I've been thinking about something. That sounds ominous. She smiled, shaking her head. Not at all. I've been offered a chance to lead a new marine conservation initiative. It would mean more responsibility, but also more flexibility to work from home. I'd be traveling less. That sounds perfect for you, Daniel said, genuinely happy for her success. There's more, Tessa continued. The initiative is based here, but they're building a new research facility in San Diego. They've asked if I'd consider relocating. Daniel felt a pang of anxiety. San Diego was 2 hours away. Would they try long distance? Would this be the beginning of the end? I told them I needed to discuss it with my family first, Tessa said, watching his face carefully. Your family. You and Lily. Her voice was soft but certain. You're my family now, Daniel. I won't make this decision without you, in fact. She took a deep breath. I was hoping you might consider moving with me, both of you. Daniel stared at her, processing the implications. That's a big step. I know, and I know you have your job, your night classes. Actually, Daniel interrupted, I've been meaning to tell you, I got offered a position with Barrett Construction, assistant project manager. It would be a significant raise, more regular hours. Tessa's face lit up. Daniel, that's wonderful. When did this happen? Yesterday. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you. He paused. Barrett has offices in San Diego. Hope flickered in Tessa's eyes. So, theoretically, we could make it work. Daniel brought his hand to her cheek. But Tess, are you sure? Moving in together is a big commitment. I've never been more sure of anything, she replied without hesitation. I love you, Daniel. I love our life together. I love who I am when I'm with you and Lily. Daniel kissed her then, trying to convey all the emotions he couldn't quite put into words. When they pulled apart, he said, "We should probably talk to Lily before making any decisions." Tessa nodded. Of course. The conversation with Lily the next morning went better than either of them had anticipated. The 6-year-old was primarily concerned with whether she'd still be able to visit the aquarium and if her new school would have a good art teacher. When assured on both counts, she declared the move awesome and asked if they could have a pool. "We'll see," Daniel laughed, exchanging an amused glance with Tessa. As winter turned to spring, their plans took shape. Daniel accepted the position with Barrett Construction's San Diego office, and Tessa began the transition to her new role. They found a house halfway between the research facility and Daniel's new workplace, not as close to the beach as Tessa's current home, but with a large backyard for Lily and a garage Daniel could use as a workshop. One evening in April, as they packed boxes in Daniel's apartment, Tessa disappeared into the bathroom for several minutes. When she emerged, her face was pale. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked, immediately concerned. Tessa nodded slowly, then held out her hand. In her palm lay a small white stick with 2 pink lines visible in the result window. Daniel stared at the pregnancy test, then at Tessa's face, which was gradually transforming from shock to tentative joy. Is this? "I'm pregnant," Tessa confirmed, her voice catching. "About 6 weeks, I think." Daniel crossed the room in 2 strides, gathering her in his arms. "A baby," he whispered, awe evident in his voice. "We're having a baby." Tears spilled down Tessa's cheeks. "I wasn't sure how you'd feel. We never really talked about more children." "I'm thrilled," Daniel said honestly. "Absolutely thrilled. But what about you? Your career, the new position." "I'll make it work," Tessa said firmly. "Women have babies and careers every day. Besides, I've been thinking it might be nice to step back from the operational side of things anyway, focus more on research and advocacy. This might be the perfect timing." They told Lily that weekend, nervous about how she'd react to the news. To their relief, she was ecstatic. "I always wanted to be a big sister," she exclaimed, placing her small hand on Tessa's still flat stomach. "Is it a boy or a girl?" "We don't know yet, sweetheart," Tessa replied. "But either way, you're going to be an amazing big sister." As they prepared for their move to San Diego, Daniel found himself reflecting on how dramatically his life had changed in less than a year. From a struggling single father performing emergency CPR on a stranger to a soon-to-be husband and father of 2, with a promising new career and a partner who loved him for exactly who he was. The day before the moving trucks were scheduled to arrive, Daniel took Tessa back to Crescent Bay, to the exact spot where he'd found her that fateful evening. The beach was quiet, the setting sun painting the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. "Why are we here?" Tessa asked as they walked hand in hand along the shore. Daniel stopped, turning to face the woman who had transformed his life. "This spot changed everything for us. I thought it was the right place for this." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Dropping to one knee on the sand, he opened it to reveal a ring not as expensive as Tessa could afford, but beautiful in its simplicity, with a small diamond flanked by 2 sapphires the color of her eyes. "Tessa Davis, I came to your rescue once, but the truth is, you've been rescuing me every day since. You've shown me what it means to be truly loved and accepted. You've embraced Lily as your own. You've given me hope for a future brighter than I ever imagined." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Tessa's face as she nodded emphatically. "Yes," she managed through her emotion. 1,000 times yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Daniel was struck by the beautiful symmetry of their story. Here, where he had once fought to restore her heartbeat, their hearts were now joined forever. 1 year later, they returned to Crescent Bay with Lily and 3-month-old Noah. As Daniel watched his wife and children playing at the edge of the waves, he marveled at the journey that had brought them here. A chance encounter, a desperate moment, a life saved, and in saving Tessa's life, he had found his own transformed in ways he could never have imagined. "What are you thinking about?" Tessa asked, joining him on the beach blanket while Lily showed her baby brother a seashell. Daniel smiled, taking her hand in his. "Just how grateful I am that I knew CPR that day." Tessa leaned against his shoulder, her wedding ring catching the sunlight. "Some might call it fate." "Maybe," Daniel agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just what happens when two people find each other at exactly the right moment." Together, they watched the sun set over the ocean, the same ocean that had nearly claimed Tessa's life, but had instead given them both a new beginning, a family built on love, respect, and the unshakable foundation of two hearts beating as one.